All right. Looks like I'm live. Yeah. Everything looks good on this end. Oh, I just noticed actually got someone already in the stream. Someone very early on. That's great to hear. Well, at least somebody got a notification. That's a good thing. So how's it going this morning, Wendy? Wendy, good morning, Bennett and friends. I get to join in today. It's been a while. Yes, it has been a while. And actually, I've been reducing a lot of like the videos and streams that I typically do. It's just I don't know what it is, folks. I don't know if it's just the massive amount of distractions, which there are many, right? Or just people are busy in their own lives. Hey, maybe everyone's busy taking Jordan Peterson's advice and are cleaning up their own rooms. I don't know, but for whatever reason, just viewership is basically dropped off a cliff. And I typically am not the kind of person that just sit and talk to myself. I can do that without the camera and the microphone, right? But anyways, like I say, I'm really happy to get a chance to do the stream. Obviously, this is going to be really important. I couldn't hold off any longer. I was going to do it last week. I just wasn't feeling it, folks. I just wasn't feeling it. It's hard to get amped up and excited about things these days because it looks like liberty and freedom just keep taking hit after hit after hit, right? Right. And feet's getting a little wobbly, the knees are starting to shake right now for liberty and freedom in Canada. And like I say, it's kind of a crazy thing to see that, like I say, Canadians are just more distracted with what's going on halfway around the world than they are what's happening in their own backyard. But hey, it is 2022, the new thing, right? The new distraction, of which there are many other ones that have come in the past and I'm sure will come along in the future. Hey, Denny. Nice to see Denny's in the chat there today, too. I was talking to my wife. I was like, is this Denny? I'm not sure, but if you get a chance to reply, Denny, I don't know if it is, but are you the guy that I worked with up in Ontario? Because if you are, I'm really glad that you're in the chat there. Real nice guy, Denny. Real awesome guy. Anyways, like I said, good morning to you and glad to see that you're in the chat there. Just going to say hi, just go through the chat this morning. And I know it's a little early. Sorry about that, folks. Later on, I was even thinking about doing it later today, but I actually have other commitments things I have to do later on today. So it is that. But anyways, let's see what's going on. I meant to say, friends. Oh, no, no problem, Wendy. No problem at all. Hey, Saniko, morning. How the heck are you? Haven't seen you in a while. Glad to see you're in the chat. LOL, right? We have been downsizing our condo. It's that crazy busy. Wow. Downsizing our condo. Yeah, I can definitely understand that, especially if you're one of the big cities. I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to keep that. Although that's the other thing too, when it comes to these like the housing scheme, the Ponzi scheme, which is basically what it is. And I get it. Like people get all mad at me. Listen, I get this kind of pushback all the time. It's like, how dare you say anything? And what it is people don't want to see their golden egg disappear, right? I get it. But my initial thing is like turning your house into the proverbial pot of gold, right? I mean, look at what the effect it's having on society for the younger people. It was never a good idea. And of course, it's central bank policy that's done that, right? Huge contributing factor, major contributing factor. But yeah, if you're one of those people, like I say, I don't give out, advice because like I love, I just give out information. You do your thing, right? But I know myself personally, if I had a place, a house or a condo or anything in some of these major cities, as much as I realize they're not going to let it crash, but I think they're more than willing to allow for a correction. I mean, considering prices have gone up, increased in just since COVID, like what, almost 50% in the last couple of years. So even if they let a 30% correction, right? Which to some people be like, oh, 30% correction. Oh my goodness. But you still wouldn't even be back to the levels just 2 years ago. And there were already a substantial portion of our population, in particular the young folks who weren't able to afford even, never mind own a home, even just be able to rent a place these days seems to be a difficult task. But yeah, so yeah, if you're doing that, I can understand because right now, well, okay, so this is kind of a good thing, not a good thing, but I just seen my connection thing happen. So this will probably be, and it's a shame. It's a shame. Maybe I'll try to reach out to them, but I might have to try a different streaming service, folks. I'm, I'm typically the kind of person that, I try my best to be loyal, right? Give anyone a shot, basically, but I don't know what it is. This It can't be the internet. I did a whole thing with. I even figured. Well, I wonder. It can't possibly be my Starlink because I checked my speeds. I have wickedly fast speed, so it shouldn't be that. And I even did a whole reset this morning just in case there were some updates that it didn't get, and maybe that's contributing. But now I see it's still taking place. So the only thing left at this point in time that it can be, as far as I'm concerned, it has to be this streaming service that I'm using. I'm sorry, StreamYards, but you guys have to figure this stuff out, or I'm just going to have to seek an alternative because I cannot continue on with this. Anyways, I want to make sure everything's going good over on Rumble and of course over on Odyssey. Make sure my stream is actually working. Rumble. Yep. And okay, so I see Odyssey. Boy, I gotta tell you, Odyssey out of all of them, just it's bang on every time, works every time. I never have any issues. So that's to me, that's a great thing. Now I'm just like I say, I'm just checking on the Rumble. Have a little more issues with Rumble. Very, very, very few people actually watch my content on Rumble. I'm actually considering because Rumble actually costs quite a bit more. What I'm paying for it right now for the streaming, live streaming, and for the little bit of people that like what one or two or maybe three or four that watch, like, is it really worth it? No, I'm spending way a lot more than I'm getting in return. So I don't know. I might end up having to cancel that. But anyways, for now at least, like I say, I am live streaming on not just YouTube, but Rumble and Odyssey. And I actually tried last week. I did a live stream with Dave. Of course, we were talking about war, so I didn't really want to get YouTube, targeting my channel. Right, I've been pretty good so far. Haven't had any issues in terms of getting kicked off, right, or strikes against me. So I said, yeah, if we're going to discuss war, especially the Ukraine Russia thing, I said let's avoid using YouTube as a platform for that one. So we just did the live stream over on Rumble and Odyssey. And yeah, there's still not many people over there following the channel. But anyways, let's get back to here. I just like say hi. Hey, what's going on? Anarcha Rika, good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. I see everyone saying hi. Okay. Hi, good morning. Just checking. Okay, it's insane. Oh my God. This is why we are leaving the city, going out towards Chilliwack. Okay. Our son will take our condo. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Right on. I can understand that for sure. Yeah, it is definitely getting crazy out there. Was a bit digital, Bennett. Good to see you, bro. Oh, you mean was it doing a little? Yeah, I know. Is it YouTube? I don't know. Like I say, I don't know. It could be. But either way, it's a royal pain in the butt. It's a royal pain in the butt because I myself on my end of things, I've tried my best to try to work through these technical issues, and I don't know, it seem to matter. Like I say, I've gone from a whole new internet service provider, completely different, Starlink. Shout out to Elon Musk. Thank you for actually offering that service. It is a great service. So obviously, it comes with its own router, so I don't have to use any of my routers. I actually have 3 routers that I used in the past because I kept buying different ones and trying to upgrade, trying to figure out why I had terrible connections. Yeah, what else is it? I've tried multiple different computers, right? A couple different computers, and yeah, it just seems to be. But anyways, let's move beyond that stuff. Let's move beyond that because we got serious things to discuss and talk about today. Obviously, a major thing being freedom of speech. It is heavily under attack, as you folks know. The Trudeau Liberals are busy right now, and they're in the process of implementing bills that are definitely going to have very negative consequences and effects. If you think things are bad now in terms of being able to follow your favorite liberty type of individual or channel, yeah, I think it's going to get that much worse if some of these new laws get introduced. And actually, since we're going to start off with that, I'm not sure if you folks are familiar with the gentleman. His name's Michael Geist, but he does an excellent job. And his whole thing, his shtick is basically dealing with anything that as it pertains to government and censorship, online censorship, or any restrictions or limitations to our freedom of speech. Let me just actually bring this article up on the screen for you folks. And we'll just kind of go through it together here. Okay. Check to make sure. Okay, so there we go. So like I say, this is from was it michaelgeist.com, I believe is the actual name of it. Yeah, michaelgeist.ca is the name of this gentleman's. And actually, I would definitely recommend you follow him over on Twitter. Michael Geist over on Twitter. You should be able to find that too. I'm sure there's a link somewhere here for his Twitter handle. Anyway, so let's just get to the point of reading this. So it's a headline. The rest of the online harms consultation story. Canadian Heritage forced to release hundreds of public submissions under access to information law. And I can't wait, like I say, to get to the whole part of this that's as it pertains to the charter, right? Because I just keep hearing people talking constantly about this thing in the charter, and it's at its 40th anniversary, right? And so many people talk about things, and they're missing that one key thing. And we'll get to that one key thing. And it's so crazy. How can you have all these experts and like people with scholarly backgrounds and legal backgrounds, and even people who are supposed to understand constitutional rights, and like I say, some very apparent or supposedly or allegedly wise, intelligent people, and they all seemingly just, I guess I don't know. There's just some part of the brain that blocks out, right, the fact that rights are inalienable and inherent. Talk to anyone in the U.S., right? Look at the way their constitution is written. And yes, there's no pretense that you can override people's rights. No, your rights are inherent and inalienable, right? But anyways, let me move beyond that, like that. Beyond that, because like I say, we got to cover this first. So this was done April 21st, 2022. So just the other day. For months, For months, the results of the government's online harms consultation was shrouded in secrecy as the Canadian Heritage refused to disclose the hundreds of submissions it received. I launched a page that featured publicly available submissions, links reposted below, including 25 submissions from organizations and companies, as well as 6 individual expert submissions. I later followed up with 2 posts that provided further details on the publicly available submissions here and here. Now, mind you, of course, and you folks probably already aware of this, but any of the new people that might join the stream, all of these highlighted text in blue, that's an actual hyperlink. So you just got to click on that when you, like I say, all this stuff that I'm covering in this live stream, it will be linked in the description of the video below or the stream below. And you can click on this article and click on each one of those, and they'll take you to a hyperlink to a source for that information. Earlier this year, Canadian Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez released a What We Heard report that again blocked making the actual submission public, but provided a summary that left little doubt that the government's plans were widely criticized and required a policy reset. In the meantime, I filed an Access to Information Act request to compel disclosure by law of the consultation submissions. It took many months, but this week the department released the results. While some submissions may be excluded, third parties can object on certain grounds. I have obtained hundreds of additional submissions in a 1,162-page file. These can be obtained directly from Canadian Heritage by launching an informal access request at no cost with the department. The file to request is A-2021-00174, or click here for the full file for the moment. So once again, all great information and access right here to, if you want to get access to information for yourself and have a copy of that for yourself, well, this gentleman's helping you to find out how you can do that. I post the names of the previously unavailable submissions from organizations below. There are hundreds of individual submissions, including several from top experts, which can be accessed via the request, but I will not post the individual names here. There are several key takeaways from the broader package of consultation submissions. First, the government's determination to keep the consultation submissions secret until compelled to disclose them by law eviscerates its claims to support open, transparent government. Okay, there we go. There's simply no good reason to use secrecy as the default for a government consultation. While officials claim that submissions may contain confidential business information, the actual results demonstrate the arguments had little merit. Indeed, the confidential business information, the actual results, indeed, the government could have used openness as a default and redacted any confidential information as needed. A government that supports openness should not be forced to disclose information from a public consultation only under threat of failing to comply with its own access to information laws. I mean, hello. I mean, the fact that anyone has to even, this is it's a sad state of affairs when people even have to point this stuff out, right? I mean, should be blatantly obvious, right? Second, the participation of the internet platforms was more extensive than previously disclosed. While Google released its submission, there were also submissions from the Business Software Alliance, Microsoft, Pinterest, TikTok, and Twitter. Further, in addition to TechSavvy and Tucows, whatever, the largest Canadian telecom companies, Bell, Rogers, TELUS, Cogeco, Quebecor, and Shaw, provided a joint submission. These submissions contain important data that should be publicly available, not hidden by the government. For example, TikTok reported that in the first quarter of 2021, content that violated its community guidelines accounted for less than 1% of all video, and that 91.3% of the videos it removed were identified and removed even before a user reported them. Other notable submissions included the CBC, which argued for a special recognition of threats to journalists as content that incites violence and hate speech, and the Canadian Congress, which called months ago for the removal of Russia Today from Canadian broadcast systems. Wow, right? Third, the criticism of the government's plans were even more widespread than previously revealed. Indeed, reviewing the submissions uncover very few supportive comments of the government's online harms from either organizations or the hundreds of individual submissions. For example, the big Canadian telecom companies warned that the proposal could disincentivize investment in 5G networks and oppose disclosing basic subscriber information without judicial authorization. Their submission, along with others in the sector, reinforced how inexplicable and damaging it is that Innovation, Science and Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne has seemingly abandoned digital and internet policy. Vesting responsibility in Canadian heritage, what does Canadian heritage have to do with online harms anyway, has been disastrous for the development of balanced, effective digital policies. The most notable submission came from Twitter. Its must-read submission is here, which warned that the proactive monitoring of content envisioned by the government, quote, sacrifices freedom of expression to the creation of a government-run system of surveillance of anyone who uses Twitter. Even the most basic procedural fairness requirements you might expect from a government-run system, such as notice of warning, are absent from the proposal. The requirement to share information at the request of Crown is also deeply troubling. Further, it didn't pull any punches with respect to the government's website blocking plans, literally liken it to China, North Korea, and Iran. The proposal by the government of Canada to allow the Digital Safety Commission to block websites is drastic. People around the world have been blocked from accessing Twitter and other services in a similar manner as the one proposed by Canada by multiple authoritarian governments, China, North Korea, and Iran, for example, under the false guise of online safety, impeding people's rights to access information online. So, I mean, even here, right? I mean, you're talking getting up to some next level suppression when the countries that you're comparing it to are China, North Korea, and Iran, right? Wow. Way to race down to the bottom, right? Further, there are no checks or balances on the commissioner's authority, such as the requirement of judicial authorization or warnings to service providers. The government should be extremely mindful of setting such a precedent. If Canada wants to be seen as a champion of human rights, a leader in innovation, and in net neutrality globally, it must also set the highest standards of clarity, transparency, and due process in its own legislation. In fact, even groups that might have been expected to support the proposal were critical. For example, the National Association of Friendship Centers warned that changes to the CSIS Act related to obtaining transmission data or basic subscriber information pose a legitimate risk of governing bodies weaponizing this legislation to identify protests as anti government, especially when Indigenous people across Turtle Island articulate their inherent rights and sovereignty. Well, hey, I'm not from Turtle Island and I'm not Indigenous per se, but yeah, I'm the kind of person that will articulate my inherent rights, as I already did, and sovereignty. So, this obviously would apply to me and anyone else who's standing up for freedom and liberty. Actually is being honest and forthright about things. Of course, and then you got the Canadian Center for Child Protection. While supportive of some elements, warned against the plan to offload funding regulation to the internet providers. We strongly urge the government to reconsider the optics of directly linking the funding of these offices to the very entities being regulated by it. So basically, this is just showing, a bunch of different individuals and their opinions or perspective as it pertains to the new bills or laws that are, like I say, coming soon. Yet, despite these disqualifying actions, there are seemingly no consequences. The same department is pushing ahead with anti-internet policies in Bill C-11, regulating user-generated content, and C-18 mandates payments for facilitating access to news online, backing copyright term extension, and gearing up for another run at online harms with an expert panel that presumably hasn't even been given access to these submissions. It is time for the government to take responsibility for the online harms debacle and take a far closer look at the mess it is creating on internet policy by reassessing its approach and leadership on the issue. So, like I say, these are two bills that are definitely detrimental. And these things, as it pertains to, I was watching a video with True North, Candace on True North, and she had that JJ McCullough, another YouTuber, Canadian YouTuber. Well, that's the thing. As with most Canadians, I never really heard much of this JJ McCall. I don't watch all of his content, but I've watched some of his content, and I read some of his contributions to the Washington Post. And but I do see it. He's very much worried about freedom of speech. Well, now why that is, or suggest the reason why that is because he's recognized that he's got hundreds of thousands of subscribers in Canada and probably makes some pretty decent coin and ad revenue from YouTube, and he definitely discusses political issues and news of the day and current events. So he's worried himself it's not just that Facebook or YouTube might have to pay the CBC, which is how crazy is that? But that even content creators, individual content creators might be sucked up into that mess as well, right? So, this is the thing. And of course, being a libertarian, I'm not a single issue person. Now, this would obviously affect me as well, but I would be talking about freedom of speech regardless of whether it affected me or not. I would hope and expect that people would be a little bit more principled than just wait until it's actually going to affect them, right? A lot of these people should be thinking about that old expression or that phrase that was said many years ago, right? With first they came for. Well, don't wait until they're coming for you to start speaking out. Is kind of the point I'm trying to make here. Maybe start getting out in front of that stuff a little bit front and center. Now, I'm not obviously making any accusations towards Michael Geist or anyone, because this guy, like I say, has definitely been out in front for a long time and fighting and advocating for freedom of speech. So this is just showing down here. Actually, I'll just go through the list of some of these organizations here. Let's see. Alliance for Safe Online Pharmacies Canada, NIBIRTH, Canada Bar Association. So lots of Microsoft. So lots of submissions from lots of different people and organizations. Oh, here's the organization. So the CCLA, the Canadian Coalition for the Rights of Children. Let's see, Google Canada, International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group, Open Media. Open Media, that's another one. I haven't seen much from them in a while. But anyways, let's see who we got here for individuals. Well, there's Michael Geist, obviously. So he's just one of the individuals that submitted. But like I say, so here you have, let me bring this up here. Here you have, like I say, bills that are coming to fruition. And, with the Trudeau Liberals and their deal with the NDP, what's to stop them from passing it, right? It's just, hey, you scratch my hand back, I'll scratch your kind of deal. So, throw the NDP, some free whatever the NDP because they want free everything, right? As if there's such thing as free. I mean, how do we grow up as adults? How do they grow up as adults and still keep using these ridiculous phrases such as free healthcare or free dental or free babysitting, free daycare, right? I mean, there's nothing free about it. What it is you're just people are voting to steal from their neighbor or someone in their community, or maybe even someone halfway across the country, maybe a childless person, to pay for them to have subsidized daycare, right? I think that's pretty moral to force people that don't even have children themselves, right? And maybe on the lower end of that socioeconomic ladder, and you're forcing these people to pay for. I mean, think about how many entitled people in this country will benefit from these entitlements, and they've already got plenty of entitlements. So this is the country. Canada is now a country of privileges and entitlements. Such thing as freedom, liberty, or rights. That's all. That's all gone by the wayside. Anyways, let me just get back in here and see how everyone's doing in the chat. I see Tommy Gunn in the chat. Nice to be back. Nice to see you here, Tommy Gunn. Yes, in a controlled economic collapse currently to bring in the crypto Ponzi scheme. Yeah, they're probably going to want central banks, the CBDCs are definitely going to get introduced, but that's the thing. It's the thing. There's so much for us to push back against. But let me just move back here. Get a couple more. Ask yourself this: how does Norway have $1 trillion wealth fund, and here in Canada we have a $3 trillion in debt for our citizens? $3 trillion including. Well, because of, I would just suggest there's lots of contributing factors, but that that pretense of Canada being like, I don't understand how that works, anyways. Like the point of a country, a nation, is that we're all one big happy family, right? I mean, that's the pretense, right? Is we're supposed to perceive of each other as one big happy family, but the way this country is set up is anything but. And I mean, even the figureheads in the political realm, the established media, they're constantly talking about multiculturalism in Canada, right? So there is no cohesiveness in Canada. It's a mix mash of predominantly a lot of statists who are vying and fighting each other all the time to gain that access to that behemoth, that 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the state, so that they can use that to clobber their opponents or to benefit themselves at their opponent's expense. That is what the country of Canada has degraded into, right? Is basically a bunch of warring factions, right? That rather than actually go out and use physical violence for the most part, I mean, that will happen if need be. And we've seen that take place, just look to Ottawa, right? I mean, it is what they try to hold off using that kind of violence, right? Because the optics don't look good, but they will get there, or they will go there if pushed, right? If push comes to shove, they will go that way. Well, what typically most Canadians do is they don't like to get their hands dirty themselves, so they'll just vote along party lines. And they know which party butters what particular slice of bread, right? So if you want your big socialist policies, well, NDP, or, well, now it's the Liberals, right? Used to be if you just wanted your big socialist policies, you would predominantly lean towards the NDPs, which is basically a socialist party. But today, the Liberals are, well, they're even more socialist than the Socialist Party is these days. So people are gravitating towards that. And it used to be historically, if you wanted any fiscal prudence, you would, in terms of business, where you could use the state to maybe lower taxes. Like if you're a corporate business owner and you want your taxes lower, right? Or you want some of that nice, cheap foreign labor, right? See, whether it's the temporary foreign workers program or the mass immigration or all that labor that's pouring across the border down at Roxham Road. And yeah, that's still taking place, by the way. If you're on that conservative side of things and you want to have access to dirt cheap, labor, and that's the thing in Canada, wages for people, especially Gen X, right? People in my age range, we haven't had a raise. I started working when I was 15. I'm now 51. I have never had a raise, adjusted for inflation, mind you, over that entire time frame. That's just the reality. And the younger people, well, they're going to get an even shorter stick than that. So, like I say, there's a lot of stuff that really need to be talked about and discussed. But yeah, when it comes to Norway, they perceive of themselves, right? That's the thing. It's a lot of it does come down to perception at the end of the day, but they perceive of themselves as being part of the group, right? So they're much more cohesive as a society than Canada is. That's just one aspect. There's lots more where that came from, but sent to Ukraine to fund the war. Peace is not Trudeau's intent. No, governments don't like peace. Okay. All right, let me just scroll down here now. Okay, where was this other one I was going to cover? So we got the Michael Geist one. And of course, I'm sure you folks are very much aware of if you're an unvaccinated Canadian, you're still stuck in this country and you cannot travel across this country. So that's kind of getting to the point where we're talking about, the Canadian Charter. So let me bring that charter up, actually, since we're on the topic. Actually, let me bring up this video, because I have this video. See, this is the part that I think is what I was alluding to earlier, that I find most disturbing. And like I say, lots of people. Now, this particular lady is from the Canadian Constitutional Foundation. I've got the video set up here now, and I'm already at the 2-minute mark. I'm just going to play a little bit of it here so you can listen to what this lady, what she has to say as it pertains to the Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And like I say, this is someone who is, an insider, part of the Canadian Constitution Foundation. All right, there we go. Let me just make sure you folks can hear it, actually.
As a little bit of a constitutional law 101, the Charter sets out the rights and freedoms that are necessary in a free and democratic society. If you've never read the Charter, you really should. You won't be able to protect and defend your rights if you don't understand them or know what they are. And at the Canadian Constitution Foundation, we actually have a free online course that you can take about our fundamental freedoms. You can sign up at the ccf.ca/learn. But in case you haven't taken the course yet, the Charter sets out a number of rights, like, for example, the right to free expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, freedom of religion. It sets out our democratic rights, like elections and voting. It sets out your rights on arrest, detention, or search. It sets out your right to life, liberty, and security of person, your mobility rights, the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada.
So actually, before I continue on, I just want to point out, first of all, sets out, I guess that's a word. But like I say, if you're trying to, and obviously do this in a short, was it a 12-minute video? If you're trying to relay or give Canadians information as it pertains to their freedoms, wording, right? The proper words are what's needed and necessary. Like I've said this for, I don't know how many years now, and I'm going to continue to say it. Clarity of language gives clarity of mind. So rather than saying that the Constitution sets out your rights, you could do what the people in the U.S. and the founding fathers of the U.S. did, is actually emphasize the fact that rights are inherent and inalienable, and that all the Constitution does, right? Also, the U.S. Constitution, all that it does is acknowledge your inherent and inalienable rights. And they just write that down on parchment or paper, or now it's probably typically on computer screens, but you're just writing down the acknowledgement of those fundamental inherent and inalienable rights. Because once you have, explained it in that manner, like you see the clarity there is that when you tell that to a person, when I talk to people, anyone that's ever talked to me about rights or freedoms, if they've remembered what I said, they would know instinctively, and they'd be able to repeat at that. Well, hopefully they're thinking critically, so they're just not repeating it, but where they could repeat it because they understand it fundamentally is like, well, yes. By being born on this planet and recognize and acknowledge that nobody has any authority to be my ruler, my owner, my master, right? Then my rights are inherent. I have the right to be free from subjugation, from slavery, from servitude, right? To any ruling class, whether it's one individual or a group of individuals. And it doesn't matter how many people are contained within that group, right? Rights are inherent. You can't override those rights, right? Even the U.S., it even points out that in addition to not only do they point out in the U.S. Founding document, the Constitution, that your rights are inherent and inalienable, given you by your creator, right? So even if you don't believe in God, well, all you have to do believe is you were created, right? And you really were. We as a human species, we didn't just, it wasn't a magic trick, right? Get created somehow. But anyways, no matter how you want to look at that, is just by you being born on this planet, you have inherent and inalienable rights, fundamental ones, right? But by pointing that out and framing it in that way, it makes people understand it properly. And like I say, the founding fathers knew that instinctively, that you have to explain to people that your rights do not come from government. This document, the only purpose of this document is to point out and clarify and acknowledge your fundamental rights and freedoms. Because once you understand that, then the minute somebody comes along, like these snake oil salesmen, these lawyers, these politicians, and suggest, we can override those rights. Well, you'd be right. You'd be quick to point out, like, no. If you suggest you can override them or deny them for any time frame, whether it's 1 second, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 month, 1 year, right? You would have to acknowledge that is an infringement on those rights, or you would have to say that they are not rights, they're actually privileged. Because in reality, just like why I named this live stream, is in Canada is not really genuinely the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. Sure, that's what they called it, but in reality, the way it's written, the way it's worded, and the way it's been implemented and interpreted, it's the Canadian Charter of Perks and Privileges, right? You're basically living today as a modern day slave, and your master may afford you certain privileges, right? As long as you do what he tells you. But the minute you step out of bounds, or the minute your master decides he wants to take those freedoms, or should say those privileges or perks away, well, they feel like they have the right to do so. That shows you just how entrenched the cult of statism is. And I mean, it even permeates so much through the culture that it even trickles down to people who are part of the Canadian Constitutional Foundation. Anyways, let me just get back, finish what this lady has to say here.
Your right to a speedy trial and our right to equal treatment under the law, among others. Now, the Charter is a part of our Constitution. The laws containing the basic rules of how Canada operates. And the Constitution is the supreme law of Canada, and all other laws must be consistent with the rules set out in the Constitution. If they aren't consistent with the Constitution, they aren't valid law. Now, as I'm sure many of you.
So to make things even more confusing, is basically she's acknowledging, and it does say that it is contained within the Charter, that it is the supreme law of the land, right? So when you read all those rights, you think, well, then of course it should be a no-brainer that if any government act or piece of legislation, anything that infringes or attempts to infringe or deny those rights, well, obviously the judges, well, even the politicians, like all three branches of the government should at the very least, like, shouldn't governing 101 at least, have the people who are doing the governing understand the very basic concept of what freedoms are, right? And know how to properly interpret the fact that they're inherent and supposedly enshrined here. But once again, there's more to it. And I'm sure some of you folks already know about what that more is. That basically, supreme law of the land. Sounds good in theory, except
our rights guaranteed under the Charter are not absolute. They can be limited under Section 1 of the Charter if that limit is demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society.
So there you have it, folks. There you have it right there, right? So go to all this trouble to draft the document, spend all this time and effort, and 40 years of interpretation, and all these legal experts and scholars, right? And academics, people from academia, like I say, or the judicial realm. None of them, and like I said, I listen intently. None of them have actually pointed out or said something as simple like what I'm going to tell you right now is the charter. And I said this actually in a Facebook post, is toilet paper is actually more valuable, much more valuable than that paper, that document called the Charter in Canada. Why? Because at least toilet paper has an actual purpose, and it can serve, that purpose could be served to anybody, right? And it would benefit anyone. Whereas obviously the way the Charter is written and drafted and interpreted, it's like I say, we're going to pretend here are all your rights, and we're going to lay them out. Look at it. Like they put all that effort, right? All that work into it. Actually, let me put that document up on here. They went to all the bother. Just 1 sec here, folks. To list all your rights and freedoms. There we go. So let's just go down through them here now, right? So here we go. Let me make sure you folks can see them. Yep. So there. So the Constitution Act in 1982, Part 1, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. Now we'll just move on here because, like I say, we'll get to that part later. So here's your fundamental freedoms. Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of conscience, religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication and other media of communication. You see, you get that, right? You see, sounds good. It all sounds good, right? Freedom of peaceful assembly. Yeah, that sounds good too. We'll be liking that. Oh yeah, that's really good. And freedom of association. Oh man, you have the freedom to associate with whoever you want to, with whatever individual or whatever group. You cannot be forced to associate with any individual or group. That's what it says, folks. That's what it says. You're all right there. Democratic rights of citizens. Every citizen in Canada has the right to vote in an election, a member of House of Commons, or of a legislative assembly, and to be qualified for membership therein. Okay, maximum duration, blah, blah, who cares, whatever, continuation in special circumstances. So this basically in time of real war, invasion, or insurrection, House of Commons may be continued by the Parliament, and the legislative assembly may be continued by the legislature beyond 5 years. So basically saying if it's in times of war, you don't want to have an election in the middle of a war, then you can once again override a specific rule up there, right? Let's see here. Oh, and mobility rights. Every citizen of Canada has the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada, except, right, if you're not vaccinated, right? Rights to move and gain livelihood. Every citizen of Canada and every person who has the status of a permanent resident of Canada has the right to move to and to take up residency in any province and to pursue the gaining of a livelihood in any province. But once again, unless you're not vaccinated, right, and then that no longer currently applies because you have to get there. Right? So here we go. Limitations. So here we're already starting, right? And I'll get up to the front. Don't worry. I haven't overlooked the biggest limitation, right? The rights specified in subsection 2 are subject to any law or practices of general application in force in a province other than those that discriminate among persons primarily on the basis of province of present or previous residence, and any laws providing for reasonable residency requirements as a qualification for the receipt of publicly provided social services. So, already seeing exemptions and exceptions there, right? And look at this, folks, affirmative action programs. Now, one thing you will never find in the U.S. Constitution is anything that pertains or suggests, although these things have come up after the fact, and once again being interpreted to grant privileges and perks rather than acknowledged rights, which all rights, proper rights, are not just inherent and inalienable, but are negative rights. So you can't force anything, or you can't, right, shuffle the chairs around on the deck, right, in your favor. You don't get to play politics in terms of giving some people in society a leg up or an advantage over others, right? That whole equality thing. Except here, for affirmative action program, subsection, so 4 subsections 2 and 3 do not preclude any law, program, or activity that has as its objective the administration in a province of conditions of individuals in that province who are socially or economically disadvantaged if the rate of employment in that province is below the rate of employment in Canada. So once again, they can just selectively target and, prop some people up and, hold some people down based on, how well they're doing in life, right? So obviously that's not something that should be properly acknowledged as a right, because that's not right what rights are. So once again, that sounds more like a perk and a privilege to me. Legal rights. So you have the right for life, liberty, and security of person. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. So you got to remember the principles of fundamental justice, and then we'll get up to the top here and see where they point some of that or expand on that. Everyone has the right to be secure against unreasonable search or seizure. Well, unless you're a trucker in Ottawa, right? Or an RV, someone in an RV in Ottawa is part of the trucker protest. Yeah, we all seen the video, right? So, yeah. Or, lots of other areas where, you could say that that's completely not acknowledged in any way throughout the courts or the legislature in this country of actually being acknowledged rights, right? Or once again, basically suggested to be privileges. We won't search or seize your vehicles. That's a privilege we're affording you, but yeah, we can override that, right? Everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily detained or imprisoned. Oh, well, that's another thing, right? That sounds good, but what if you can just make up an excuse, use just a ridiculous charge such as mischief that can be so wide ranging. I mean, look at what they've done, right? People that were basically protesting for their rights and freedoms, and to have those rights and freedoms actually acknowledged, right? To have the freedom to travel and disassemble and do all that stuff. They were fighting for those freedoms, but by daring to stand up for those freedoms, well, the government just found a way to, once again, charge them. Well, they charged them all with basically mischief. And then look, they were charged with a crime, so we don't have to worry about their rights. So once again, perks and privileges, folks. Perks, and yeah, you can be arbitrarily detained and imprisoned, right? What's her name? Leach there, and the other protesters, the trucker convoy protesters. We already know. So once again, arrest or detention. Everyone has the right on arrest or detention to be informed properly of the reason therefore, to retain and instruct counsel without delay, and to be informed of that right, and to have the validity of the detention determined by way of habeas corpus, and to be released in the detention if the detention is not lawful. But once again, if you have activist judges that we've seen, right, and will keep people, I mean, that Leach lady, she didn't even have a prior criminal record, but the judge could just, like I say, this is what I mean. When the laws are written so vague or in a manner that the judicial class can interpret them, the legal class can interpret them to basically deny your inherent rights or freedoms. Well, do they really exist? I would say no. You have perks and privileges, folks. You have perks and privileges that can be taken away from you anytime. And like I say, you're living as a modern day slave. Canadians hate to hear that. I know they do. I've got the backlash from Canadians when I try to tell them You're just a modern day slave. Now you're treated, your master gives you much more things, right? You have access to many more things, right? Like things that you can buy and consume. But no, you're a modern day slave in every sense of the word. And Canadians really can't stand it when I point that out. But hey, it's that old adage once again, people pretend or claim that they want to hear the truth until they actually hear it. And then you find out shortly thereafter, no, they don't want to hear the truth at all. I try to be tactful sometimes if I deem it appropriate. So, okay, this just gets more into, like I say, the proceed. I mean, now, of course, this would all be applicable as well. But anyways, treatment or punishment. Everyone has the right not to be subjected to any cruel and unusual treatment or punishment. Well, I would suggest destroying entire livelihoods. And I'll just talk for myself first on the impaired driving charge that happened to me back, and I was convicted back in 2012. That I'm just now, 10 years later, finally getting my life back on track. And you can't imagine not just the social cost, but the economic cost and how much it's put me behind in over the course of those 10 years. But anyways, beyond that, but that's just, once again, just another recent example up in Ottawa with the trucker protest. I would suggest all these people, think about all the truck drivers who lost their careers, and they didn't even have a few beer out on a four-wheeler like I did in the middle of the woods. No, all they really did was just choose not to have a medical intervention that the government kept trying to jam and force into them, right? Or force upon them and lied about and offered a tremendous amount of misinformation about, right? So the fact that people were hesitant with this kind of to do these, to get these jabs, especially with so much deception taking place by the media class and the political class. Well, I mean, that it only makes sense. But once again, for daring to defy forced medical procedures or taking these medical or having these medical procedures, people like tens of thousands, I don't know how many of them actually lost their jobs and their careers as a result and are still affected today. If you're a long haul truck driver, not only did you lose your job and your career, you cannot, even if you just want to drive in Canada, you can't, because you can't travel between provinces if you're not vaccinated. So you've basically had your career destroyed, right? I'd say that's pretty cruel and unusual to destroy a person's entire livelihood and career over something like this, right? That's pretty cruel and that's pretty unusual. And that's not even taking into account, think of all the other things, right, that happened and took place as a consequence of that. Stealing people's money, giving banks the pretense of authority to go in and steal people or to freeze their money, right? Or giving corporations the ability to take people's money against their will and withhold it, right? I mean, especially when you're talking about these banks, like the banks in Canada, these same banks that were all bailed out and propped up by the government under Stephen Harper, mind you. So this is what I mean. There is no, to me, it's left, right, like whatever. Two wings of the same bird, right? Same authoritarian bird. But I mean, the banks all got bailed out. We were forced as taxpayers to bail them out. And then some of those very taxpayers, not only were they forced to bail out these banks, well, these banks in turn got to go in and freeze their accounts and prevent them from even being able to put food on their table. How's that for thanks, right? Pretty crazy stuff. And of course, you got equality rights, equality before and under law, and equal protection and benefit of law. Once again, these are all great. They sound good in theory, but once again, we know how it actually works out in practice. What else do we got here? Minority language education rights, so Aboriginal rights, enforcement of guaranteed. Anyone whose rights or freedoms as guaranteed by this charter have been infringed or denied may apply to a court of competent jurisdiction to obtain such remedy as the court considers appropriate and just in the circumstance. So if your rights have been taken away, the courts will, they may. That's the thing. They may, based on how they interpret, right? So this is the thing. You would think, oh, well, all these people, well, they'll be able to be made whole again by using the legal avenue, the justice system to, like I say, fight back against all these infringements on the rights. But no, as we've seen, political activist judges, and the fact that all the provinces and, of course, even the federal government have at some point in time during the last 2 years invoked these Emergencies Act, which basically overrule and override and pretend that none of these rights exist. And of course, if you're a judge, right, you're not allowed to think critically. If you're a judge in Canada, no, you're not allowed. You have to interpret everything based on what, the legal precedent or how the laws are all written. So in reality, the truth of the matter is, and this is where we get up to the top here, how a judge can completely ignore all your fundamental and inherent inalienable rights and freedoms is by this very small, almost inconspicuous little line in the Canadian Charter right here. Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. See, now if it had been left right there, well, just like with the U.S., at least most of the times, they would have been forced to interpret things as being government's not the one that's writing or acknowledging your rights. Or I mean, government's not the one who's giving you rights. You're God and the rule of law. And the rule of law happens based on of actual legal precedent, not based on politics or politicians or acts of legislation, right? There's a difference between common law precedent and acts of legislation. Big difference. But here's the part right here, folks. Rights and freedoms of Canada. So right here, number 1, section 1 of the Charter. Very first, right? The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So that right there, it's right there, folks. It literally suggests that, all of these are all your rights, right? And freedoms, all the way down, all of this. This is all your rights and freedoms, except right here. All you have to do is invoke that. And we've seen Trudeau did it. He did it, right? He invoked today is called the Emergencies Act. Prior to that was the War Measures Act, right? Actually, it was that War Measures Act. Prior to 1917, Canada, there was no such thing as an income tax. No government had any authority or any pretense of authority to go in and take any portion of your income without your express permission, right? But once again, because of this interpretation, or actually, no, this wouldn't even been written. So actually, this wasn't even written into it. So even back then, so even in 1913, they used then. Well, of course, the War Measures Act would have been the legal excuse where here's all your rights. Now, you can't be forced or compelled to go kill another human being. Nobody has the authority to force or compel you to go kill other human beings or to travel to foreign destinations or to pick up a rifle, right? Nobody has that authority except under the War Measures Act. And because people were foolish or naive enough to think that the state had that authority, or they were willing to allow the state to have the pretense of that authority, well, not only do they force people to go and die and fight in foreign wars and foreign conflicts, but yeah, the income tax came to exist. So now they have access to control your mind and your body, or I mean your body and what you can do. But in addition to that, by having the power of the purse, by having the power to steal from you, they can use the proceeds of that theft to then use that to pay off their enforcers, right? Think about all those cops, and it wasn't just the buffet that they were loving up there, right? That were beating down the truckers and the protesters and trampling on, ladies in scooters, mobility scooters and stuff. But think about it. They were all doing that because they were getting a paycheck, a really, really healthy paycheck at that. One that most people in Canada be like, I'll never see that kind of paycheck. Well, that's because, they function off of the state. The state can forcefully steal from anybody or economically slave entire generations to prop these people up. But think about it. The only reason why the state has the power is not just the pretense of their authority, but the fact that they can use the proceeds of that theft, hashtag taxation theft, to then pay their employees, their enforcers of the state, right? And all their order followers to follow out those. And we all know what people will do for a paycheck, right? So, but I mean, just the sheer fact that it's actually acknowledged right here, right at the very top, that you don't really have rights. And that's just the truth. But how many people, this is the part where I'm trying to get to though. How many people? You're not going to get it from this, what's her name, from the Canadian Constitutional Foundation. Matter of fact, you're not even going to get it from people like Julie Ponesse from the Democracy Fund or the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Or you never go, or anyone in the legal class or anyone in the political class. You're not going to hear it from anyone in the established media. I mean, there's a couple contributors that you might hear something like that in the National Post, but very few people in Canada are typically privy to this kind of information. So, I mean, it's acknowledged that in Canada, hopefully more and more Canadians will finally come to realize this, is you live in a land as a modern day slur, whether you want to call yourself a slave, subject, or serf, right? Pick your poison, right? Come up with your own, indentured servitude, whatever, however you want to describe the fact that you are basically owned, right? Because that's the thing. How can you claim to be sovereign and free from subjugation when it's literally written in the document in the country you live in that there are people, and even on rotating things. So it's not even like a person or a specific group of people. It's a rotating thing. So anyone that comes to power, so it's not just the Trudeau Liberals, right? No, it could be the Conservatives, could be the NDP, could be the Green. Whoever comes to power has the pretense of authority to completely ignore and override your inherent and inalienable fundamental rights and freedoms. So once again, in Canada, all you really have at the end of the day are a bunch of perks and privileges. That's not a good starting point or position to begin, especially when you're trying to negotiate things with government. Like the government has already got, like, they've got everything. They've got the power of the purse. They've got the legal class captured, right? They've got the education, right? Think about all these people that are coming out of these schools, right? With these woke educators and going straight into the pipeline of the judicial system or becoming part of that system, right? They're all, and we're seeing it taking place, they're all believers in statism. None of them are believers in genuine freedom and liberty. And there's very few people out there, like I won't say nobody, but there's very few people out there who are willing to sit down and be completely and 100% honest with you. I've actually tried to reach out to a couple of the alternative media platforms, True North being one of them. I see True North as being a great alternative media platform in Canada that's challenging the status quo and the establishment. But what I'm starting to recognize and see, and hopefully I'm proven wrong here, is they're seemingly seeking to become the new information gatekeepers. Because it does seem, no matter what, people like myself, it seems like a coordinated, or maybe it's in their own personal interest, or they just don't want to have to deal with any controversy. I think could be a little bit of cowardice. Conformity, yes, but probably more cowardice than anything. Is very few people are willing to allow people like myself to have the platform to actually speak truth. Now, I don't care if it's me. Like I say, I'm looking out there in the landscape, and I'm just hoping someone else will pick up that mantle. Actually, go right to it. But it's not going to be Pierre Poilievre. And as much as I think Pierre Poilievre, he's definitely probably going to be the winner of the leadership race for the Conservative Party, and he'd probably be a much better option than basically anyone else out there. But I'm also seeing he's just as much as hypocritical as everyone else. I seen him talking about, rental properties. I was right there with him, all these properties. And he was showing that house out in BC, it was a couple $1,000,000 or whatever it was. It's just ridiculous and how crazy it is. Well, I guess it turns out that actually Pierre Poilievre and his wife have rental properties as well. So it's hypocrisy, no matter where you turn in this country. And of course, that's the case. Of course, it's not just this country, but of course, it's the case that they're going to be a bunch of lying hypocrites, and people are just willing to spew whatever they want or whatever they feel like to entice people into supporting them. Because once again, they're not held to any standard, just like the charter. The charter, if this is supposed to be the supreme law document of the land to recognize the supreme law, right, and all that in the land, well, look at it. Look at how much of a fail that is. Well, that's just, like I say, that just permeates through the rest of the culture, whether it's in the halls of education, academia, or, like I say, in the media, in the political class, in the corporate class. I mean, we're seeing today, people are so far removed and so far away from even understanding just the very, very basic concept of what does it mean to be a free human being? What are the baseline fundamental principles that you need to recognize what a free human being is? Well, like I say, the American Constitution did an exceptional job of that, although they did leave a little bit out there for the state, which is why we're seeing the rise of statism a couple hundred years later. But they did a much, much better job today. And of course, Canada failed miserably by adopting this Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. It sounds like good and like for a person like myself, I'm like, well, of course we should have a charter to point all the, but because of the way it was worded and the way it's been implemented and interpreted, it literally gave, like I say, all three branches of the government. Gave the judicial, it gave the executive, and it gave the legislative branch, all of them, the ability to deny your perks and privileges anytime they want by simply pointing out that they can do so. And like I say, that's the first part of that draft. So I would love to be able to speak to some of these people. Matter of fact, I would love to be able to talk to was it Brian? What's something there? That guy from Newfoundland that's taking the government to court. Because I would just simply ask, why would you draft the Constitution, right? And a Bill of Rights and put something like that in there? Why would you think that that would be a good idea? Who thought that? Oh yeah, we should never have the authority to do all these things, but just in case, right? Yeah. So once again, in Canada, there is no genuine acknowledgement. So when people are there wondering why, how the heck did the Trudeau Liberals get away with what they did? Well, how the heck did all the premiers get away with what they've been doing by infringing and denying our inherent rights and freedoms for the last 2 years over COVID, right? I mean, you've seen every province has implemented some form of lockdown, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, or passports. All these impositions and restrictions on our fundamental rights and freedoms happened in every province in every jurisdiction. And like I say, even when you think about, oh yeah, but like to mention that you can challenge these things through the courts. Well, yeah, but what good does it do you? What good is it going to do for all the Canadians who suffered under the heavy hand or felt the boot of the enforcers, right, at the Ottawa protest? I mean, how long before we're even going to get the point? It could be the end of the year before there's even any, for the Supreme Court even hears any of these cases. And we've already seen anyways that some members of the Supreme Court, one in particular, is basically a liberal political activist, right? So are they going to interpret things? Well, if they're going to go by the letter of the law, well, if they're going to interpret things, they're going to interpret this way, which is to suggest it was okay. It was okay to do that because, hey, the charter was written to give governments the ability to deny your perks and privileges anytime they want. So I don't have a whole lot of faith, and I'm not holding out a whole lot of hope that even when these things do go to court, that we're going to be on a better footing or stance, beyond that. I don't know how that's going to pan out. I would like to, at the very least, though, start to see some people, not just in the establishment, I'd like to see someone in the establishment, but even some of those in the alternative. Hey, if you don't want to give my voice a platform, if you don't want to give me the opportunity to say what I've got to say, well, then, like I say, pick up that mantle, pick up that torch yourself and do it. So if you're watching, not that I expect you are, Andrew Lawton or Candace or Cosmin de Souza or Post Millennial, anyone out there that's in the alternative media, Spencer, it's really important that you start, giving Canadians what they need to push back against the ruling class, right? Which is the absolute unbridled truth that can be proven objectively true, which is that your rights are inherent and inalienable. Those words should be literally sitting on the base of the tongue for anyone these days when you're talking about the charter and all these crazy things that are happening to people who, are challenging the status quo or the current establishment, the ruling establishment. Look at what has taken place, folks. Because if we're going to get beyond this, if Canada's even going to remain as a country, and once again, I'm not a statist by any stretch of that, but if this country is going to remain remotely resembling a cohesive nation, then yeah, we got to get to the point where we actually have the baseline, the basic ground rules that like the rules that lay out how we deal with each other socially and economically, right? The rules of the game, they have to be laid out properly and articulated in a manner that cannot be misconstrued or misinterpreted. That is very important. And like I say, can't help but point out the founding fathers thank goodness they were wise enough to use the words cannot be infringed for the Second Amendment. Because if they had used any other word or had interpreted the right to bear arms in any other way, you best believe they would no longer have, while the U.S. would probably cease to be the country it is, the beacon of freedom and liberty. Well, I know it's subsiding these days, but it would cease to be that current leader, even though, like I say, the rest of the world has fallen down too. I get it, but it's doing it. At least the U.S. is still holding itself higher than the rest. And because of the fact that the way the founding fathers worded and enshrined those fundamental rights in their constitution is the reason why they still retain those, where in Canada, we don't. That's a major thing. And we have to at least not just get up to being on equal footing as our American counterparts in terms of pointing out and laying out the groundwork for what it is to be a free human being. But I would say even go one step beyond that. That's the thing. We don't have to rely on a document that's a couple hundred years old, and we can appreciate it, right? You can even put it in a nice little frame, little gold embossed frame, put that on your wall somewhere. And it was a great thing for something for 200 years ago, right? But in the modern world, we have to do better than that, because what we've seen is that document actually, because it left room for the state to encroach on our liberties. Now, it did take time, but it did happen nonetheless. So at the very least, we have to have something remotely resembling a conversation about what it is to be a free human being in Canada. And until that starts to be taking place, where people have access to the bully pulpit, like someone in the established media or someone in an established political party, I just don't see how that happens, because the gatekeepers, like I say, the old gatekeepers and even the new, are completely unwilling to give people like myself, voices like myself, the chance to say what I've got to say. So how do I get my information? How do we get this kind of information out there when we basically are surrounded by a bunch of gatekeepers? That's a tough one. That's a tough call. But, maybe someday we'll get this figured out. And I was just going to scroll on down and see how you folks are doing in the comments. Hey, who's Jesus? How's it going there, buddy? Oh, I see. Okay. Never mind. You guys are talking amongst each other there. Let's rip the word government apart. Govern to control something or someone or something. Meant the mind. Yeah. Control. Well, this is what I mean, right? Clarity of language gives clarity of mind. If we want to have, a country filled with citizens that actually understand what it is to be free, then, the contract or this pretense of the social contractor or whatever you're going to have, what are you going to draft? It has to at least, at the bare minimum, lay those fundamental rights out and not leave any room for misinterpretation or a denial of those fundamental rights. Hey, what's going on? Dave dismantled. Once we hit a majority, then we have a real chance of tipping the seesaw all the way. That's true. That's true. The problem being, though, Dave, is I don't know how long it's going to be before we get to the point of being in the majority. I keep hoping for the best, and I do see there is some growth, right? I'm definitely seeing the word libertarian thrown around a lot more these days. That's one good thing, like I say, and like even by some in the established media. So, there is growth. There is a growth trajectory, but how fast, as opposed to how? Think about it this way. Here's how I think of it. How many libertarians are coming out of education or post-secondary educations and institutions, right? As opposed to statists or Marxists or authoritarian collectivists, right? Are we going to be in the majority? I don't know. I say no, to be honest with you. I just don't see that being a majority position. If we were even remotely close to that being a majority position, I mean, you would see that actually taking place in our society. You would see that there would be a leaning towards that way, but actually it looks like we're going the other way, right? We're losing more freedoms. We're not gaining any. And like I say, in the information space, I'm not seeing, like I say, the ones that are people like myself, I'm not seeing, if I saw a rampant rise, and let's say not even just myself, and people who are willing to watch and consume content that talks about real things that philosophical concepts as it pertains to freedom and liberty and economic prudence and all these things that matter to libertarians. I'm just not seeing that like being adopted widely in any way, shape, or form. I'm sure, like I say, there's a decent subculture of us in this country, but I think we're still a very, very, very tiny minority. But talking about libertarians and stuff, let me just bring this up here, folks. Because I want to bring this. This was an actually. I always give kudos where it's due, and this is a article, letters to the editor, or letter, yeah. So this was a letter to the editor. Yeah, not an editorial board thing or anything. That would have been nice, but hey, at least it's something, right? This was done April 24th, 2022. And you look right here. RE, we are less free today than 40 years ago. The social justice threat to liberty. This is Ryan Alford, both April 16. So it was two of them. So there was two. So this is someone replying to, we are less free today than 40 years ago, and the social justice threat to liberty. So apparently Ryan Alford did contribute or offered up both of these. Anyways, so the United States Bill of Rights is based on Enlightenment political theory. The natural rights of John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's The Social Contract, maybe Immanuel Kant's moral principles based on human autonomy, all uphold the principle of inalienable human rights. To suggest a right is granted but can be limited, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society, is like suggesting one can be a little bit pregnant. So that's kind of good to see that there is someone, like I say, how many people will read that article, in relation to the general population? Probably not even 1%, right? So I don't know. Rights are generally designed as a buffer against government overreach. When government can override rights with a notwithstanding clause, we have no individual rights. A right is a right, or it isn't. You can't suck and blow at the same time. So this one was actually Larry Sylvester from Acton, Ontario. Kudos for Ryan Alford for nailing the most important constitutional issue of our time. Should the government and courts be deciding social justice issues, or should individuals, through their own deliberation, decide for themselves? Liberty and freedom should rest in the people's hands, as was originally conceived by our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Freedom of speech is the most essential cornerstone of democracy. Trust the people. This was by Patrick Skilling, Victoria. Anyway, so that's that. Let me pull that one off. There was actually a couple other things I wanted to cover here too, folks. Oh yeah, I do have an article as it pertains to Pierre Poilievre and the rental units. Because once again, I'm not going to give anybody a free pass. If you make yourself out to be a hypocrite by bullshitting people, I'm going to call you out on it, no matter what party you represent. And yeah, that was a dumb move, Poilievre. That was really dumb. All right. Let me bring this up here. Was it this one here, possibly? All right. Just looking for, there we go. Is this probably it here? Nope, it isn't that one. Okay, I'm just checking one more. One more here. Okay, it might be this one here. yes, I believe this might be it right here. Okay, I'm going to read this one here, folks. Okay, pretty sure this is the one. Okay, let me bring this up for you folks. Oh, I see there has been, oh, hey, Fraser McBurney, haven't seen you in a while. How you doing, man? Thank you very much for your donation. Appreciate that. The Trudeau government, aided by the NDP, have no respect for the Charter of Freedom, 1980, or the Bill of Rights, 1960. Let's hope the courts will save us, but I doubt it. We're facing tyranny. Well, this is what I'm getting at too there, Fraser, and not sure if you're familiar with this, but there was actually a judge, a Canadian judge, that talked about the freedom protests, the trucker protests in Ottawa, and basically brought up about anarchy. And so this judge basically, and I think it was one of the main judges on the Supreme Court, basically doesn't look good. And like I say, there seems to be a lot of political activism on the bench. So I myself, I'm not holding out a whole lot of hope for that, like yourself. And to me, like I say, the only thing I keep thinking of time and time again when I'm thinking of this stuff is, what can I do? What can I do? Just like you, what can you do? Well, the number one thing I think that we can do, like I say, number one thing is just like any issue, right? Is let's acknowledge the problem first. And the problem is that Canadians don't understand what it is to be free. That's really at the end of the day. It can be summed up and broken down into that very, very simple statement. Canadians are born and raised and live out their entire adult lives never actually even knowing what it is to be a free human being. I didn't. I'll be honest with you folks. I kind of had an inkling. I always rebelled against authority and stuff like that growing up. Like, not authority in terms of doing things bad. I mean, arbitrary authority, right? This kind of top-down kind of authoritarianism. I was never a fan of it, whether it came from the church or the state, right? Never a fan of, always challenge that stuff. But I also recognize that put me at odds and a complete outsider in comparison and contrast to most of my fellow Canadians, to most of my peers. That is just a true statement. And it's a true statement today. Even after 10 years, more than 10 years now, I've constantly talking about and discussing and interviewing and doing live streams and videos and just a tremendous amount reading, right? And just trying to figure all this stuff out. Like I say, I haven't even perfectly come to figure all this stuff out, but I look out there in the landscape, and just like you folks here, we're miles out in front than everyone else in society. And in reality, it's not helping us because we all live in the same country. I mean, it's good for us to have this kind of knowledge, but is it really helping us out much? Maybe some areas in our personal life, for sure. In your personal life, understand what it is to be a free human being and how to treat other people in the same way. Oh, that has amazing amount of positive effects, and it will have a positive effect on anyone's life who lives that way. Those who have that live mentality, that libertarian mindset, it pays dividends tremendously in your person. But how's it playing out there in the big old political landscape? You know, in the fact that we live in a state, right? It's not working out so well because, like I say, of one very simple thing. In the age of information and the modern internet age of the internet, and with all this access to all this education, right? People still, the overwhelming majority of people in every country, but I'm sticking with Canada, don't even know something as simple as, what does it mean to be a free human being? But boy, by the time you're in grade 1, 2, or 3, you already know what? A dozen or more genders, right? You already know that there's I don't know, I guess maybe once you get into what, grade 7 or 8, or I don't know when they teach this stuff, but you'll learn that there might be a gender gap, pay gap, right? I mean, People are told all these things that are meant to divide us or to keep us thinking, terrible of other people or in the doldrums, I mean, and not ambitious or goal oriented or completely flattened, right? Not just socially, but economically. But but they'll know all that. Like I say, they'll come out of school, they'll be able to repeat and regurgitate all kinds of these SJW talking points, right? All these intersectional areas of breaking humans down based on like what's between their legs, right? What color their skin is, where they were born, where they were. But they'll learn all that, but they won't learn a very simple thing: is what does it mean to be a free human being? Right? I mean, that's done on purpose, and it takes a tremendous amount of effort to keep people that ignorant. That's the other part that we never take into account. Is think about how much work and effort. Well, I know myself. The statists have been working hard, although, of course, you got multiples of them against. I shouldn't say working, but they have been putting in a lot of effort into suppressing and silencing people like myself to the point where, like I say, used to get thousands of views to the point where it's like literally not much for nothing anymore. But why? I mean, why put so much coordinated and concerted effort into preventing people like me from speaking? Because what I have to say is profoundly powerful. What I have to say and what you folks have to say can give actual real people genuine self-confidence, self-esteem, and acknowledgement of what it is to be free. And once they understand what it is to be free, well, then, like I say, the sky's the limit after that, right? We could be going through, and we might be right now, maybe this is just the early stages, but we could be literally going through the Enlightenment era 2.0, as I've coined it in the past. And it could be going through a lot quicker. We could be a little bit further along in the stages of development along that process if it weren't for the multitudes of gatekeepers. And some of them who even, I don't know, maybe they just believe that what they're just doing it for the right thing. Like, oh, we just can't let this information because I'm trying to do my thing over here. But if people find out that the state is illegitimate, well, then everything's up in the air. It's just going to be pure anarchy, right? And it's like, no, like I say, it's just like with anyone, with any problem, you have to first at least acknowledge what the problem is. That's the only way you're going to get beyond it. But like I say, so many people are so ill-informed or just don't know themselves how important it is just to have that very basic understanding of what a free human being is. And like I say, you get that national sentiment in people and they're like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat too much because, like I say, but that's the thing. If you're fearful from just the point at what it is to be a free human being, if you're so fearful of that, well, your society's built on some pretty shaky ground, right? Right? If it can't even withstand someone pointing out that, hey, you're not a free human being, well, I mean, what could cause society to get so irate or so crazy or someone pointing that out? It wasn't by the fact that it's basically the greatest truth almost never told, right? It's one of those secret things that only a very few people know about. And why that is, like I say, because think about the amount of work these gatekeepers have put in over the years to make sure very few people get to learn these things, right? You don't want the slave classes to be going around actually acknowledging that they're free. And I've pointed this out before too. And this is the sad part of it is at least slaves who were actually, back in the day when they were actually called slaves, right? At least they knew they were slaves. I'm sure maybe a few of them could trick themselves or convince themselves that their master was a benevolent, I don't know, uncle, maybe, I don't know. But you can rest assured that the overwhelming majority of people who were actual slaves, serfs, or subjects, at the very least, bare minimum, knew they were slave, subject, or serfs. Whereas in the modern world, the intellectual class, those in academia, right, and those who continue that kind of indoctrination, or they call it education, throughout the rest of your life and horizontally enforced by the rest of your peers, look at how seamless that has been. It's got to the point where you live in the modern age of information, in the internet age, and the majority of the people still don't know what it is to be free. Sad. But It is just a reality, folks. It is just a reality. Okay, let me just get want to cover a couple other things here. Actually, let me get into the comments here real quick. Oh, well, Barbados. Yeah, there was something happening in Barbados. Getting rid of the Queen. I remember that. Yeah, we need to do the same thing. But it's our only hope. It's not just thieving of rights that take a country down. You indebt them to the max and tell them, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm with you there. Um, Hey, Gato, how's it going, my friend? Intersectional bullshit cannot be about freedom because it is about communism. Yeah, exactly. This crap was created by the Frankfurt School. It is to divide people in classes because Marxism requires a class struggle. Yeah, you're right there, Gato. 100%, man. 100%. Yep, I'm with you there, Matt. 100%. Can you use no contract if notwithstanding? Yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? It's that, oh, is this goes back to Lysander Spooner, and I definitely recommend you folks, if you're not familiar, I would imagine most of you are, but for those of you aren't, or maybe you know people that might be privy to learning some of this information, is check out Lysander Spooner, some of his works, which was No Treason, right? Hey, that social contract, yeah, did you sign it? This is the crazy thing, right? Is you can actually go out and talk to other Canadians and just bring it up just as a thought experiment. I like doing it, you know what I mean? Do it in a nice way though, like so you don't get people too up in arms because this stuff, like I say, but I'm a firm believer if you just bring it up, even if you're not getting a very receptive audience initially or immediately, that stuff might stick in their head. They might take the time to think about it a little bit more in deep, maybe when they're at home alone, or like I say, taking the time. Oh, yeah, what was that guy's name? Lysander Spooner. Oh, yeah, let me look into that. And like I say, well, we all know what it's like to go down one of those rabbit holes. Like once you start learning about this kind of information, and it's something that you've never heard before in your life, it's like, but it's so profoundly true and fundamentally important in all of our lives. Like I say, it's very enticing and it's actually rewarding to, like I said, to develop your mind in such a way where you're actually thinking like an adult rather than like adolescents, which is predominantly what most of our peers in society, that's how they predominantly perceive of things or think about things basically as an adolescent. Their minds have never been properly allowed to develop and mature into full on adulthood. Because if they had minds that were fully adopted and matured to adulthood, they would acknowledge that, of course, nobody has any inherent right or authority to take from you without your will, to control every aspect of your social or economic life, right? People would just understand that. And it wouldn't be this thing where we function where slaves were on a big giant plantation and slaves are all divvied up into teams just like the NHL where you got the Canadians, the Maple Leafs, right? The Vancouver Canucks or whatever, and everyone's like just you know fighting amongst each other or pitting one group against the other. That's the intersectional stuff too, right? Without any of them looking up and acknowledging that, oh yeah, we're living on a plantation here. Maybe we should not be living on a plantation. I disagree with you on a lot of areas, but you know what? What I'm suggesting is let's put all of our differences aside for now, just for now. Let's figure out how we can get ourselves off of this plantation and, you know, in some area, at least in our mind for now, at least in our minds for now, right? How we do that, how that translates into the actual physical space, the physical realm, I don't know. But let's at least get free in our minds, right? If we can get at least that space that actually acknowledges what it is to be free, and at least, like I say, at least that's that big first step in a long road. Trust me, there's a long road to travel from where we're at today to where we're actually living in a genuinely free society where people will treat each other as such, right? But you have to make that first step. That's what we need to do. So my one recommendation to you is, because people are talking about the charter, right, of perks and privileges, right, is just talk about this stuff. Bring up people like Lysander Spooner, John Locke, property rights. That's another thing, actually, if you acknowledge that in our rights and freedoms, I didn't see anything in terms of property rights, right? Property rights are fundamentally important because, first of all, my body, everything, that is my property, right? Just like my mind, it's mine. Nobody else gets to control it. So property rights isn't just a parcel of land. It also includes self-ownership. Every aspect of my body, of my anatomy is mine. It's my property. Nobody gets to control that, right? So if we can just, even, like I say, get people to first start understanding what it is to be a free human being, then we may very well be able to get beyond the point where we are today. But I can't see it happening. I've been watching this as well as you folks for a long time. I can't see us getting beyond that point until we at least get a substantial portion of the population acknowledging that we basically live on a plantation and we've got to do something about it. At Mother's Earth, who's your daddy? Good one. I like that. The slave thinks he owns himself. Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. Yeah, the walls are closing in. The frogs are almost boiled. Castro keeps chipping away at our individual. And while this is, you're absolutely right there, LK. And the crazy part is, while this is all taking place, the most prominent voices advocating for liberty, I'm seeing less and less and hearing less and less of them today. Even Tim Moen, I haven't really been hearing a whole lot from Tim Moen. Is it because, I'm not privy to a lot of what he's seeing because maybe the algorithm is prevent me? But no, can't be that, because I can always check it what he's doing. But like I say, there used to be in Canada a certain select group, small group, mind you, of people who were, at the center core of those who were advocating for fighting for freedom. But, and I even understand, because I'll even just speak for my own self, is after doing this for 10 years and being the kind of person that, like, if it's not working, right, I don't like doing the same thing over and over again if it doesn't seem to be working. So that's why even myself, I'll get heavily into things and then I'll kind of pull myself back a little bit, because, like, if it's not benefiting me, if it's not benefiting society, if it's not really benefiting anyone, in a whole lot, right, then I don't know, what are we doing here at the end of the day? This is why, like I say, it's got it to me. The big gauge, the big measure is it getting out beyond our inner circles? Is this kind of information, this kind of promotion of freedom and liberty, this acknowledgement of what it is to be a free human being, is it permeating? Is it getting beyond this small group of us that already understands it, right? I don't know. Like I say, of course, I'm not privy to what's happening and taking place in all jurisdiction at all time across this country. But based on how everything is portrayed or presented to me, right, how the media is framing everything, is liberty's taken many, many steps back, right? I mean, I got pretty excited about the trucker convoy. It looked like that was finally going to be it. But look at the response. Look at how much harm to so many people were caused as a result of that. And, trust me, as someone who is already, beaten down by the state, I know how that is. I know how it can hinder your ambitions. I know how it can hamper your confidence. I know how it can put you in a totally different mindset where you maybe don't have the wherewithal, or maybe you're just even worried about some kind of legal ramification or repercussions for doing so. Because that's another thing too. A lot of people, think about it. It's not just canceling on Twitter, but I mean, a lot of people have been harmed in many areas of their social and economic lives for daring to stand up for freedom. And each one that tried that and everyone out there watched and seen how badly they were beaten down with nobody else coming to the raid, right? It's like, well, do I want to pop my head up there so I can understand? Which is why I guess, just like with so many other areas in the past, a lot of this stuff, I guess we're not actually going to be privy to. Why? Because you can't put yourself in any kind of public space, whether it's online, or actually I should say predominantly online these days. You can't really put yourself much in the public space or the public square. So we're talking about the big behemoths, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and all that, and expect to see where that culture will be properly allowed to flourish, right? We're seeing the only place that I think that is going to take place, and just like in the past, of course, they didn't have the alternative or the option in the past, whereas what? You just got to meet up people in a pub. Yeah, maybe have a party in your backyard. I mean, you can at least do that. Maybe rent a space somewhere. Because to me, that looks to be pretty much the only thing left these days, is to just find spaces where they can't prevent us, right? Right now, online, there are ways for them to do gatekeeper. They have gatekeeper capabilities, right? To keep us kind of divided, suppressed, and apart from each other. Whereas, in that physical space, well, that's the thing though. It really, even in the physical space, it's going to be only going to be people who are really close to you in your genuine community predominantly. But you know what? Hey, once again, it literally has to start at home anyway. So maybe that's what we got to be doing. That's what we got to be doing. Maybe doing stuff more local, and maybe it'll come out of left field someday and we'll see what, oh, there's that. Look at that. There was all that freedom and liberty pent up, and the Canadians are willing to fight for it. They were just busy coordinating and consolidating their efforts. I don't know. Could be the case, although I'm not privy to any if it is. So, anyways, let me just check what time it is here, because I'll try to keep the live stream. So it was 1:41. I'll probably tie this live stream up. I'll check out in the comments, because I think, like I say, the main thing that we wanted to cover was the charter and freedom of speech. Really important, of course, for freedom of speech. And it's obviously really important for the charter rights and freedoms for Canadians to actually get to the point where they actually know what freedom is. So yeah, I was just looking back through some other things that I was going to cover, but now we'll deal with that maybe in another future live stream. Anyways, folks, I will tie this live stream up. Just give me a sec here. Yeah, it is safer to meet in a pub. Most revolutions started in cafes. Harder for the state to spy on you outside. That's true. True, Gato. True. I should read it. Okay. Oh, you're banned from Twitter? Dang. Yeah, that sucks. I almost took myself off Twitter entirely. I never got banned. It was just such a dumpster fire for so long. I was like, it was out of all the social media platforms, but I thought, no, I've never been comfortable to this day, which is why I'm still doing YouTube videos. I don't feel comfortable vacating the space, because I feel like the minute I vacate these spaces, you're just allowing the authoritarians to encroach. And once again, I keep retreating by one step, and they just keep advancing by one step, right? It's like, no, I'm over in those spaces too, right? But I'm staying here. I'm staying here. I'm one of those people. I'm willing to stand, right? And I guess suffer the abuse, but I realize how important it is to make that stand, and at least be courageous enough to make that stand. And maybe it'll embolden others to do it as well. Oh, thank you, Wendy. Thanks for joining the stream. I really appreciate that. And thanks for all the rest of you folks who joined the stream as well. Really appreciate all you folks, like I say, because it's you folks, as we know. It's you folks, people like myself, people like yourself, the only ones that right now at least have the knowledge, the information, right? So we can be that foundation to build upon. It's just a matter of figuring out, like I say, how we can grow and expand on more and more Canadians to get to the point or the place where we're at. Because once again, if we can get enough people, and we do live in a democracy, and as much as I'm not a fan of Canada's first past the post system. Matter of fact, I'm not a fan of picking rulers at all. But one thing I will say, because it is based on plurality in Canada with the first past the post, you don't even need a full majority. So yeah, if you could even get a plurality of Canadians who just care about the freedoms and at least be willing to put their petty differences aside and show some unity under that banner of freedom. And I'm saying that this too, like I say, even if you're a PPC person, listen, nothing against you folks, but your party is not going to win. Like, we're just not there. And just like with the Pierre Poilievre, I've been kind of advocating and defending him lately, but I'm seeing like if he's going to start bullshitting and being a hypocrite, most of the areas he's been really good at. But just like other people point out, rhetoric, words are empty. What have you done? It's like, what are you actually doing, right, to help Canadians learn about freedom? Well, I will say he's at least saying some of the right things. I will say that. But then to be talking about the housing thing and then you yourself holding multiple rental properties, and that's another thing, even people that are that have rental properties. So of course I don't have anything against anybody having rental properties, right? And of course I'm an advocate of the free market, but I mean, this is another thing. We all got to get the point at some point in time, and this is the part where me and conservatives predominantly tend to part ways these days, is pretending that you're living in a free market environment, right? Of course, a private business should be able to do their thing, right? As long as they're not using force, follow the same rules the rest of us in society, right? They should be free to do what they want to do. But like I said, we don't live in a free market environment. The housing market, right? Of course, people should be able to buy multiple houses and rent them out in a free market environment, because you'd have to do all that on your own, own power and your own resources. But the state is literally propping up some people in society whilst holding the boot on other people. And predominantly is typically, now there's outliers and exceptions, but predominantly it's not just the boomers, but older Canadians, right, have benefited tremendously on this housing Ponzi scheme, whereas younger people who haven't gotten into it or even got into it later, you're not going to benefit as much, right? It's just not going to happen, right? And like I say, with all the central bank policy that basically enticed everyone to get into this, using their house as an investment tool. And why? Because they're seeing out there all the other investment strategies or tools that were afforded them were themselves proven to be basically Ponzi schemes. So there's not much left. There's not much left in terms of ways for people to, benefit themselves economically without using the state. This is the problem today. The state has set up the system so terribly that most people actually, even ones that are principled, have to forgo their principles, yield their principles in order to benefit themselves economically in this country. It's a terrible, terrible slide to the bottom. It's a terrible slide into that kind of collectivism. And of course, we're trying our best to get as far away from that as possible, but we still got a long ways to go. But I'm going to keep this, tie this live stream up on a positive note and just say, there's one thing I do know about not just Canadians, but humans in general, is we do, and I've said this before in the past, we do make advancements. And usually when we make our greatest advancements and achievements, it tend to come on the other side, the immediate other side of some really bad thing happening prior to it. Are we living through that prior time? It sure seems like it. And if the status quo in terms of human innovation and our ability to adapt and evolve in terms of not just, the things that we can produce and provide, but what it is to be a free human being, well, maybe we are on the precipice on the others, where that other side is just around the corner. I hope so. I'm sure you do. You folks do as well. Anyways, have a great day. Have a great rest of your weekend. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.